how you like it, yeah.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the We Don't Know TV podcast. My name is Leaf. I am your host. This is a podcast where we watch the first episode of a show and then we talk about it. I apologize if I sound all nasally. I've been sick and I'm still congested, so you're gonna have to listen to me like this. Nothing I can do about it. I mean, I've tried, but nothing's working. But anyways, we're talking about Avatar, the live action one that just came out on Netflix. So the premise on IMDb states, a young boy known as the Avatar must master the 4 elemental powers to save the world and fight against an enemy bent on stopping him. That's pretty by the book. I mean, yeah, not too much I'd really change about that. It's pretty set in stone right there. So before we even get into this episode, if it's your first time here, I go through the plot beat by beat. That way you don't have to, and that way I don't forget anything. I was going to originally watch the animated episode first and then hop into this one and then kind of, compare and contrast. But I was like, you know what? Let me just hop into this because this already comes with a bunch of baggage, being it, a show, a super beloved show that has now been turned into a live action specifically on Netflix, which could be, you can get a Death Note or you can get a One Piece, if you know what I'm talking about. So it's never really too sure. I was like, you know what? Let me try to watch this as if I was someone who has never seen Avatar. And with none of the baggage of the original, I'm just going to hop right in. So that's kind of how I watch this. Of course, I'm probably going to bring some things up from the animated show. But I just kind of wanted to hop in and just clean slate. So I haven't even watched anything. Anytime I'm was on Twitter or TikTok, I scrolled past. Because I was like, I don't want to muddle my view of something I haven't even watched yet. So anyways, enough about all of that. Let's hop into the episode. So we actually start in Capital City with a chase scene. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? And turns out an earthbender, I can't talk today, is being chased by some firebenders. He has a scroll. So far, the bending in this small scene is looking good. He is trying to get to this guy so they can get out of there. Things aren't looking too good, so he just earthbends the scroll to the guy, and he's like, dude, get out of here, they gotta know, the firebenders are gonna start a war, and he earthbends a wall, and basically is like, alright, I'm gonna take on these guys by myself. Fights alone, he's doing his thing, but in the end, he ends up getting captured. I thought they just straight up killed him. But they bring him to the Fire Lord at the time, I think. And it turns out that it was all a trap. He's like, yeah, I wanted you to get the scroll out so that you can have everyone go over to the Earth Kingdom. And you know what? When you guys are over there, the nomads are going to be free. And we know that the next avatar is going to be an air nomad. So we're just going to wipe them all out. And it's like, oh, shit. And then he burns the dude to death. And this is where, this is not like the animated show. We didn't get this opening. You see firebending in the animated show, in a, maybe people get burned. But, we don't see it like this where it's almost realistic fire. This dude is burnt to a crisp, so it's oh, okay, this is a little more PG-13. This is where we get into the intro. We see water, earth, fire, air, and it explains the avatar cycle, which I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense to kind of get for new viewers, just be like, hey, this is how being the avatar works. This was already explaining that they don't know who the next Avatar is in terms of the airbenders. This is where we see Aang, and Aang is hanging out on a building, and this is the one scene I did see on Twitter that people were kind of mad about. And Aang is flying, which is it's kind of, as a fan watching this part, just a small scene, I was like, is he flying? Because you're not supposed to be able to fly as an airbender unless you take very specific steps that, I could totally get into, but I'm not going to get into. But, that's kind of why Aang has the whole kite, so he can fly. So it's why is he flying? It seems like he can just fly. I don't like this. I am like those people on Twitter for a second. But I was like, all right, it's a small scene. Let me see what they do with the rest of the episode. Aang comes down, he talks to Gyatso, they're like, yo, we gotta do your basics, and he's like, man, I already know my basics, like, I don't even need to do those anymore. And I was like, okay, Aang's a little bit cocky, but that's cool, he's a 12-year-old boy, of course he's gonna be a little cocky, he's, like, gifted with, special powers. But it turns out that there is a great comet festival coming, and all the airbenders are visiting. And it's like, oh no. He's like, all right, Aang, go get ready. And another nomad comes up to Gyatso, and he's like, yo, did you tell him that he's the Avatar? And he's like, no. He's just like, we're just chilling. He's just a kid. And this is where we get the meeting between the air nomads of the Southern Air Temple, and Gyatso's like, listen, Aang is a little kid. He's 12 years old. If we send him out to war, like, we don't know if he's even ready for that, let alone, like, being the Avatar is more than just being, like, this super soldier. It comes with, like, diplomacy and, like, all these other things. Like, he's supposed to be, like, the beacon for the 4 elements and, like, the people of them. And, Gyatso's, like, he's got to learn all this stuff. Like, we can't just send him out there, like, half-assed. And all the other ones are like, no, we need him, like, out there. Like, things are going bad. And it's already at this part where I like that we're having this character who, because a great part of the animated show is it constantly reminds you that that Aang is a kid. So already having Gyatso be like, hey, I know he's burdened with this great thing, but, like, let's not forget, everybody, that he's just 12 years old, and having everyone be like, nah, we gotta get him out there. It's just like, can we, anyways. So we cut to Gyatso and Aang, and they're in front of a statue of Yang Chen. She was the previous air nomad, previous air avatar. And Gyatso's like, listen, you're the Avatar. That's why you can do all these amazing things. The world needs you. And, you're going to have to learn all the other elements and kind of go off and do your thing. And, of course, Aang is like, but I don't want to leave you. Like, you're my friend. And then Gyatso's like, you will always be my friend. And this part made me tear up just because I know where this story goes, but we'll move along. So this is the part that I really enjoyed of this episode, where Aang is outside by himself. Well, outside with Appa, but there's no other, like, humans around. And he's just talking to Appa, and he doesn't believe in himself. And he's like, everyone's telling me that I'm supposed to do all this amazing stuff, and all the other kids are like, oh, well, you have all these powers and stuff. And then he's like, if I could trade it with any one of them, I would. He's like, I just want to, like, chill and hang out with my friends. And again, it's like, Aang is just a boy. He's just a boy, which is why I like this specific scene, because I'm like, I really set it up for any new fans of being like, Aang is just a kid, all right, with this extreme burden. He's only 12 years old. But Aang's like, listen, I gotta go clear my head. Appa, you want to get out of here? And they just fly away. So he can just, they don't have cars. So this is like his version of going for a drive. He just needs to, think some things out. And this is where the Fire Nation shows up, of course, as he leaves. And the leader's like, yo, no survivors. And it's like, man, this man's out for blood. And then they fly up. And at the moment, I was like, what are we doing here? But there's a part a little later that made me kind of change my mind. So we'll get to it. But at this point, I was like, they can fly now. And then also I was like, this kind of takes away from, like, a certain character. But I was like, anyways, we'll move on. So the air nomads, or the first one, right? So they land. The air nomads like, everyone, like, there's people here. Like, we're in danger. And this guy looks scared for a second. And then when he realizes he's surrounded, he's like, nah, you're gonna have to earn this. And he starts putting in work. Like, hey, this man is fighting back. He ends up losing. The one thing I noticed about this, or that I found interesting, is because they clearly went more for action than for the original story. Because when you watch the animated show, the air nomads feel like full-on monks. Like, if the Fire Nation would have showed up, they would have tried to talk their way out of it. Like, hey, let's have a discourse. Let's really talk about this. Like, you don't need to do this. Where these nomads feel more like warrior monks, where they're like, listen, we'll talk to you, but if we need to put in, if we gotta throw the hands, we'll throw the hands. They're like, no, you're gonna have to earn this. So they're fighting. They're not winning, but they fighting. Like, they're throwing hands, they throw in sticks, they got airbending, of course. And of course, this is where you see the brutality of firebending. You're seeing scorched chest. One homegirl later gets completely incinerated. So it really is showing like, firebending is not something to mess with. Like, if used for malicious intent, it will, do what fire does. So this is where we get the part where we're kind of flip-flopping back and forth. Aang and Appa are caught up in a storm. Things aren't looking good. He goes to turn around. This is where I was talking about where the one female nomad goes to spin and she just gets incinerated into ashes. Aang and Appa are trying to make it back and a giant wave comes and just engulfs them. Meanwhile, Gyatso is with the kids and he gets surrounded by a bunch of firebenders. The leader's like, oh yeah, you might have been a match for us, but we have the power of the comet, which goes back to the part where they're flying, which I didn't like, which kind of makes sense, but I still didn't like the whole Tony Stark aspect of it. But because they're boosted up by the comet and because I know what firebenders can really do with the comet, I'll let it slide. This is where Aang they get caught up in the water. He instinctually puts them in that ball of ice. So we cut to Katara. She is trying to waterbend. It's not working. We're now at Wolf Cove. Sokka addresses the troops, which are just a bunch of kids, and he's like, none of you caught fish, so now we gotta go fishing, so you guys go do something and we'll go out and fishing. Sokka and Katara go out fishing. It turns out that Sokka doesn't like that she has been out there waterbending. Sokka wants her to help more around the village instead of trying to learn waterbending, and Katara's like, hey, this is part of our culture, it's part of our history, it's important that I learn how to waterbend. And as they're talking, the current picks up and it starts to drag them, and they are thrown off the boat, and they see this giant ball of ice. And real quick before I get lost, I already like that these characters feel like the live action version of the animated characters. The Sokka actor actually kind of sounds like Sokka. Katara has the same vibe of Katara from the animated series, so there wasn't this weird disconnect. It felt like they were very well casted for their parts. Katara tries to waterbend the boat to bring it back to them. That way they're not out there freezing. The ice behind her starts to break from the giant ball. Meanwhile, on Zuko's ship, the statues next to him start to glow. The ice breaks open, a giant beam comes out. Zuko sees it, and he's like, finally, the Avatar. And I actually, and this is a small nitpick, I didn't like this part because in the animated series, Katara is having an argument with Sokka, and she's unintentionally using her anger to waterbend, which cracks this giant ball of ice. Whereas with this, she's just casually trying to pull the boat near her, and then the ice cracks open, and it's this isn't really, I feel like it undercuts Katara in a way that could have had her really show that no, waterbending is really powerful, and she has a decent affinity for it. She just has to learn how to use it, which they kind of do later, but I have a problem with that part later, but we'll get there. I didn't like this part as much as the animated series, so we'll just say that, but it's a small part. Aang emerges from the ice, passes out, slides straight down in front of them. It's a little funny. Sokka's like, well, we should just leave. And Katara's like, what are you talking about? This is a kid who just fell out of the ice. We have to help him. And Sokka's like, I'm in charge of the village and the village's safety, and we shouldn't just bring this random kid, but if you feel so inclined, I guess we'll take him. And it's all right, Sokka, I get what you're talking about, but you're kind of being a dick, you know what I mean? Let's pull it back a little bit. And they leave with Aang, but Appa is still frozen. We are back in the village. Everyone's around Aang while he's passed out, and Gran, their grandmother, is like, oh, he's an airbender. And then it's okay, well, she's the only one that seems to know what's going on, even though there seems to be other people that are older, and not old, but older in the village. But I was all right, I guess Gran's the source of all the information. We finally meet Zuko, and he wants to investigate. Uncle is I don't know, we've kind of found the Avatar, a bunch of times, kind of insinuating like something's always happening that feels like it's like Zuko's like, it's a sign for like finally. And during this conversation, we also learned that Zuko has been banished, and the only way for him to get back is to find the Avatar. His uncle's like, hey man, like getting the throne isn't everything. Zuko's like, maybe it wasn't for you, but like this is my destiny. So Zuko is like headstrong on just getting the Avatar and getting back to whatever status he used to have. And so far, the casting, again, is fine. Like, it feels like the characters from the show, so I have no complaints as of this moment. Aang wakes up, and he goes outside. He sees some kids running around, and he, like, instinctually follows them. And it's a small thing that you wouldn't know unless you watch an animated show, but I love that he's just, like, he doesn't know where he is, but rather than freaking out in this exact moment, he said, like, oh, other kids, like, a chance to have fun and, like, just be, a kid. And this is where he meets Sokka, and it finally clicks for him, and he's like, wait. Like, where am I? Also, like, where's Appa? And then he like, floats up, and it's like, I'm not sure if he's flying or just kind of floating, because he got hops, right? He can hop high. I've seen it. That's not an issue. But it's like, all right, can he fly or can he not fly? Because I'm a little confused. But anyways, he blows the whistle. Nothing really happens at first. And then he's like, do you guys know, like, have you guys seen, like, a sky bison? And everyone's looking at him, but they're not saying anything. So he's like, hello? Like, you guys know what a sky bison is? Like, 6 legs? You know what I mean? Flies in the air? No? And then this is where Appa flies down. And everyone's like, what the hell is that? And he hugs Appa, and he's like, this is a sky bison. And it's like, yeah, he's a little kid. You know what I mean? He's just having fun, living life. And then Aang explains to everyone, we cut to a new scene, what he remembers, basically being in the storm, preparing for the comet coming. And of course, the Comet Festival triggers Grand. And this is another part I seen on TikTok, but out of context. I was like, you know what? Let me watch it in the show. Where she basically does the intro, where she's like, water, earth, fire, air, long ago, blah, blah, blah. And for me, this part is weird simply for the fact of her going water, earth, fire, air. I think if she just would have been like, hey, long ago we used to be at peace, and the Fire Nation came and attacked and, like, started a war, and now, like, everything's gone, specifically the air nomads, like, they died first. I feel like if it was just phrased differently, and again, cutting out the fact that of the actual, like, nations themselves, I think this small line would have worked. But I think they were going more for, like, look, fans, this is for you. And it's like, I would have wished it was a little more realistic than a little nod for us. It just felt weird. But of course, the important part is Aang learns that, like, hey, everyone you know is gone and dead. And then this is where we cut to the ship again. It turns out one of the lieutenants isn't happy. He's like, listen, every time we go somewhere, it sucks, especially here. It's freezing cold. Why can't we find the Avatar on, like, an island? You know what I mean? And Zuko's like, what? Sorry, you were saying? And then he's like, okay. Again, he's determined to find the Avatar. He's like, we're going to find the Avatar or we're going to die trying. So he is all about the Avatar. Katara goes to console Aang. She's like, are you okay? And he's like, everyone I know is dead. And she's like, I know what it's like to lose somebody. And it's like, Katara, he also was thrust into the future. So it's like, I don't know if this is exactly a 1-for-1. But basically, Katara's like, hey, listen, the Fire Nation attacked the village. And then all the warriors left to go deal with it. And they never returned. And that was 3 years ago. So essentially, her brother Sokka was left in charge, which is why he's in charge of, like, a bunch of children. And there's kind of, like, really no one left in the village. You see the frozen Fire Nation ship, when they did that attack, and Katara's like, hey, the waterbenders are still fighting, specifically in the north. She's like, the Earth Kingdom is still holding strong, hopefully. So it's like, oh, okay. It seems like she's getting her information more from stories than from actual sources. So it's like, it's still not clear what's actually going on at the world at this time, which is interesting. Aang is having this existential crisis, of course, because he's thrown into the future. And he's like, I used to have friends in the Fire Nation. And Katara's like, no one visits nations anymore. Like, we're all very separated. Katara takes Aang to the ship She shows where she tries to teach herself to waterbend. She was saying that they killed all the other waterbenders when they first came. Aang is like, well, the monks told me like bending is all about like energy and like the flow through you. And she's suddenly able to waterbend a little water ball, which is like, all right, cool. And she turns around and she sees that Zuko's ship is coming. And she's like, uh-oh. Yeah, Katara and Aang go back to the village. This is where Gran spills the beans. And she was like, yo, you're not only an airbender, you're the Avatar, aren't you? And Katara and Sokka are like, what? And she's like, yeah, he's supposed to be like balanced to everything. And Sokka is pissed off because he's like, you were supposed to like fix everything and you didn't. You ran away. And Katara is definitely on his side. But they got to get ready because Zuko's here. So Zuko asks for the Avatar, and you get this small scene where it's Zuko and all his soldiers who are clearly like, young adults, and then it shows Sokka and all of his soldiers, and they're just kids. They're really just kids, and you could tell that Sokka's like, yeah, we're not gonna do anything here. So he goes to grab Aang, and Katara's like, listen, we need the Avatar. The Avatar brings hope. He brings balance to all of this. Like, we need to protect him. Like, we can't just give him up. There's more at stake than just the village. And Sokka, gives in. He grabs a weapon, goes out there. He's like, listen, I'm in charge here. You gotta leave. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna burn this village to the ground. And he's like, wait, what if I fight you like man to man? And Zuko's lieutenant's like, we can just burn this to the ground. And Zuko's like, nah, I want to handle this. So the two of them have a fight, which really isn't even a fight. It's just Sokka kind of like dodging for his life. And this is where Aang intervenes. The kids, the soldiers, come in and they start throwing rocks. They're like, all right, we're going to burn this shit to the ground. And Aang's like, all right, I'll give myself up. Let's cool down, everybody. They go and they take Aang. The ship is leaving, and Sokka has a change of heart, and he's like, he puts another kid in charge. He's like, you're in charge now. And Sokka and Katara go to save Aang. Iroh meets with Aang, and you have this interesting conversation that I don't remember them having in the animated series, where Aang is like, why did you guys even start the war? And Iroh's like, well, some of them think like, oh, just like fire, we're all about like burning shit down. But he's like, we're thinking, hey, if we're in charge, then there'll be peace. And we just want to get rid of you because we know that you'll get in the way of us putting our peace on everyone else. Which is like, hold on, that's not how that works. Like, you don't... It's fairly colonizer mindset to be like, yes, our way is the way that everyone will be happy. And it's like, hold on, everyone has their own ways of like living. Why do we have to impose ours on everybody else? But even then, Aang is like, do you think that, like, do you believe that? And Iroh doesn't answer, but he's like, you know what? I'll bring you some tea later. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And he leaves. And as he leaves, the guard turns around, and Aang uses airbending to grab the keys. Back at the village, they're like, all right, maybe if we find a good enough current, we can, catch up to the boat and save Aang. And Katara's like, I have another idea. And then Sokka's like, no, don't. And then it shows them flying on Appa, and of course they're screaming, which I feel like is a miss, simply for the fact of, like, having them having them bond with Appa, because Appa is a character. And I'm sure there's budget constraints and all that, but like, Appa is a character in himself, so having the two new characters not bond with essentially another character is really weird. And also, he's never met them. Like, it wasn't like he came out the ice. He had like just flown down, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna use you to like go save your friend. But again, we don't even have a scene of them saying that. They just fly away on top of him, it makes him feel more like a horse than an actual character. Back on the boat, Aang hides, because he escaped, he hides in Zuko's room. He sees a book with some avatars in it. He's like, I'm gonna take that. He sees his staff, he takes that. He sneaks on top of the ship. He starts to fly away, but Zuko notices. They start throwing fireballs. He's dodging, but until Zuko throws a really good one that hits him and knocks him down. But of course the crew comes and they snatch him up right before he can fall. And this is where they're flying away, and Zuko throws a really big fireball, and it is blocked by water from Katara. Now, they're like 30 feet up, and so you have to imagine that she like took water from the sea and then shot it like straight up like 30 feet to like block this fireball, which seems like such a high level move. I know it's like, oh, she did it under stress, but again, this is where I was talking about the scene where she unintentionally breaks Aang out of the ice, and now they're using that like energy here to have her block this fireball that's like super high in the air. But it just felt like she was too overpowered in my feeling, that it just didn't work for me. I know it was like a super small scene, but you know, if you're setting up a world with rules, especially for people that have never seen Avatar, it's kind of like, well, what are the rules here, you know? This is where they say that they need somewhere to go. And I thought it was going to be like, oh, I know where to go, and then the episode was going to end. But apparently there's more episode. So they go to the Southern Air Temple. Of course, everything is destroyed. Again, it's hundreds of years in the future. Aang goes and he finds Gyatso's skeleton. And of course, he gets pissed off. He goes Avatar state, spoilers, that's what it's called, if you haven't seen Avatar. He's freaking out. Sokka and Katara try to run away, and they're almost blown away. Aang gets a memory of Gyatso being like, hey, I'm your friend, I'll always be your friend, and he's able to calm down. When he calms down, they are able to have a conversation. Sokka is like, what the hell was that? Aang is like, I don't know, but my destiny is to learn all the elements and bring peace to the land, so that's what I need to do. And we cut back to Zuko, and he's like furiously drawing a picture of Aang. He like pins it to his wall, and he like, you know, heats up like, I gotta catch the Avatar. And that's where the episode ends. And I kind of wish it would have just ended with them being like, I know where to go, and then the next episode being the Air Temple. But I guess, you know, because this is only 8 episodes, they're like trying to fill in all the other stuff. I haven't seen all the other episodes, so maybe it'll make more sense. But I just felt like the last couple bit of this episode could have been used in the next episode instead. But if it's your first time here, I have a 3-point ranking system. So it is 1 and done, give it a chance, or I'm in. For this one, I'm going to say I'm in. I enjoyed the casting. All the characters feel like the characters from the animated show. I enjoyed the bending. I like the fact that like this is a little more mature, with like firebending being a little more violent and being like, no, this is actual, like they're moving fire around. Waterbending, it looks good. Again, earthbending looks good. Like, I guess this is a Netflix show, so I wasn't pending like a super, like, you know, like a movie budget. So everything looks good. Again, the only issue with in terms of powers is like, what is the power scaling? Like, because Katara seemed to do like a super high level move, in my opinion, and Aang is like flying around, but he's not flying. Like, what is he flying? Not flying? I don't, you know what I mean? But I'm interested in seeing if, because I know for a fact that they're like, oh, because we're doing this in 8 episodes, we're like moving things around and we're adding some things. Like I said in the beginning, the whole entire temple scene with the like Comet Festival was not in the animated show, and there are already things that they're doing, I guess you would say, earlier than they did before. And I know some of the controversies were that, hey, Sokka isn't going to be this like sexist character, but there's a reason he was. But they're like changing his character, and they're like changing Aang's character. So because this first episode was almost super close to the original episode, in my opinion, except for like the beginning, I was like, okay, so far this is like pretty faithful. But again, I know changes are coming. I know there's obviously budget constraints, and they're doing this in less amount of time. But there was enough in this first episode that I was like, okay, this is good. I like this. Let's see if they can, you know, keep this up. and not piss off me, who is a fan of Avatar. Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode, and I was like, okay, I can see what we're doing here. I have a few concerns, but yeah, I'd like to watch more of this. Now, I've seen clips, unfortunately, again on Twitter and TikTok of just like certain things, and I know people are like, "Oh, I have a problem with this and I have a problem with that." Again, I'm going in trying to just absorb this almost as a blank slate. Um, so I'm trying to go in with the most open mind of this because I don't want to unintentionally be like, oh, this show sucks before I even give it a chance. And then I watched One Piece. I'm a big One Piece fan. And, that was different, but it was still very good. So I am hoping that this is in the same vein where I'm like, okay, this isn't, the original, but we have the original, right? This can be something else. And hopefully be done well. I can keep rambling, but I'm going to kind of leave it at that. Next week, I am going to watch the original episode of Avatar and see how I feel about that. And hopefully compare and just see, how does it feel as opposed to this. So watch out for that next week. I might still be congested for that episode, so I apologize in advance. But if you want to keep up with me, you can follow me on Twitter at Little Leafers. And other than that, that's it. Peace.